Well, 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 we finally had a break in the weather. I decided I'm going to try to get this guy up in the air. The SP-140 has just been sitting in the garage, waiting and waiting and waiting. I just got back from Florida. I spent a week down there, just about a week down there. I did my trike transition training and trike, I don't know, certification, whatever you want to call it. So I got the tandem exemption now, so I can carry passengers. My trike should be coming probably within the next 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. So in the meantime, I really want to spend some time with the SP-140, get comfortable with this, get a little better understanding on how that battery works and the usage and all that. If you hear the beeping in the background, that is because the unit is plugged in. So when it's plugged in, there's a beeping just to let you know it's plugged in, and it's gonna wear the battery down a little bit. You can see the controller is on. Let's go ahead and get it going. So, Florida, perfect weather. I mean, we had the best conditions for the 2 days of training that we did, and the third day, conditions were good enough where we, continue to play with the trikes and work on touch and goes and all that kind of stuff. So, very, very happy with how it all came together. All right. Now, as I've said before, here's where we're at now, 96%. As I've said before, this trigger is so sensitive. You can see I put a spring on there to help a little bit, but I almost need something with a little bit more resistance. The last thing you want to do, especially with the amount of torque on this thing, is accidentally hit that. So, we should have really good wings for an inflation. Really nice inflation. Okay, boys. Alright, everything looks good there. We'll get this set up before we get too far in here. So when I had my motor in for repairs, one of the things that they were able to do was they pull the data from the CPU. And from that they can look and see basically the flight characteristics of all your flights, or at least you could tell from my first one. And one of the things he pointed out was the fact that I was on the throttle so hard. So I don't know if you remember from that flight when I flew it down in Florida, it was kind of windy, so I had to go full throttle in order to get myself where I needed to be. And that was fighting against the wind, and then I wanted to gain some altitude. Plus it was my first flight, so I was really just, I don't know, I guess I was probably a little bit uncomfortable with, I wanted to be up high. So anytime I drop low, I wanted to get high again, just in case. So anyway, this time around, I'm going to try to stay a little bit more steady on the throttle here. So if you take a look, you can see we're at about 6.4, anywhere between 6 and 7 kilowatts of power. And that's to maintain this altitude. You can see my altitude's at 120 meters, okay? And we're using about 75 amps. Now, just like any battery, you see where it says 65%? Anytime you apply power to a battery, unfortunately you're not going to get an accurate percentage of what's remaining until you let off power. So that's just consistent with any battery I've ever used. But so let's drop power. I love how quiet it is, and you can see I'm at 80%, 81%. So that's really nice.
So we've been flying for about almost 6 minutes now, and I can't remember exactly where we started. It was somewhere around 95% battery. So we're just going to kind of cruise around at a more normal pace, you know? It's just like a gas motor. If you're on the gas hard, you're going to burn through gas much faster. In this case, if we are cranking and banking, I think that's the term they use, we're going to run through this battery much faster. So the whole idea of getting this system was to just have a nice machine to go up and have a smooth ride and kind of tool around and check things out, which is what this test is all about. Let's see what we can do on this one. It's actually not bad at all tonight. I was a little bit worried about conditions as we'd get higher, but it's actually really nice. So you can see I'm staying pretty steady there at between 6 and 7 kilowatts, or maybe at about 70 amps. I've got a little bit of a tailwind here, but that shouldn't affect too much here. So I actually really like this machine. I love how quiet it is. I've got my muffs on, and honestly, I just have a very small hum in the background. And obviously, if I go full throttle, I can hear the prop spool up and it's louder. But just for normal cruising, it's very, very comfortable. And there's no vibration with this thing. It's just smooth as can be. I definitely like that. Now, one of the reasons I went with the larger battery is I assumed I would be up for 45 minutes, and even if it was 30 minutes, I'd like to be able to be kind of hard on it, you know, build up speed and do all my fun stuff, low flying, and still have more than enough battery. But what it's coming down to be is it seems more like that 30 to 40 minutes is going to be my average, so maybe a 20-minute flight of more aggressive flying. But yeah, I really like just how the motor feels. I like the comfort of this harness. I think it's a dudek harness, if I remember right. And yeah, everything fits pretty good. One thing I do notice is there's definitely some torque steer. So if I go full throttle, you can see we're kind of going off. Maybe if I weight shift a little bit, I can throw that off just a little bit, but we're gonna buzz down here. I see my daughters just came out, and actually I want to trim out a little bit. I forgot I'm still trimmed all the way in on this thing. She's nice and slow when that happens. Oh, that's what it is. Something felt really weird with my brake, and you can see it was twisted around. That's what was going on there. We'll fix that here in a minute. Still get all the fun characteristics of flight. Woohoo! Yeah! Well, that's going to burn up some of my juice. So yeah, this toggle, there we go. I knew something didn't feel right, and I've had a couple times where I've gone up for a flight and my brake toggle is like wrapped around, so that was definitely missing that in the pre-flight. Got to be careful with that. So let's take a look-see here. Obviously we are on the gas a little bit hard there, but we're still, so we're going to climb a little bit here. So our kilowatts we're using a little bit more. We're up to 11. Slowly gaining some altitude, then we'll level off. Now I also trimmed out, so obviously it's going to take a little bit more power in order for us to build some altitude. We're back to between 6 and 7 kilowatts. We're at about 75 amps we're using right now. Now remember, it says 52%, but that's because we're on the gas. Once we get up a little bit higher, I'll let go here. We get the peace and quiet of flight, and it jumps up to, looks like probably around 65. Yeah, okay. So we're still looking pretty good. My neighbors probably like this paramotor much nicer. It's from the ground. It'd be interesting to hear how quiet it is. So yeah, you can go full throttle on this thing, and yeah, there's no vibration. It is smooth as can be. Okay, we're back up to about 110 meters, and yep, we'll maintain. We're a little bit higher on our usage right now, just because we have a tailwind and I need to maintain, but you can see actually we are gaining a little bit of altitude. What a nice night out though. So I know I've had kind of my ups and downs on this motor. You know, everything takes time to get comfortable with. You know, whether it's a new throttle, the sound of a new motor, just the, fit and finish. I wasn't extremely happy with the overall quality compared to what I was used to with the Parajet Maverick. But the more people I talk to, I guess this pretty much comes from another machine. I think it maybe was the air conception. So these are titanium tubes here, so these are more than strong enough. I don't think the cage would really hold up in even a mild crash. It's really not that strong. Not everything fits perfect together, so there's some things that obviously I would like to see better. But the reality is, in order for them to keep the cost at a reasonable level comparable to a normal paramotor, I recognize that they had to, they couldn't use a titanium cage and the highest quality parts, because that would bring the cost up, and a lot of people would probably be deterred from the electric just because it's costing more. So anyway, I recognize that, and you kind of accept that. As things get better, or the costs kind of come down, maybe efficiency costs of making the batteries or buying in bulk, whatever they need to do, I'm guessing they'll probably have options of higher quality frames to put the electric motor on, things like that. But at this point, it works pretty good. Just like my recommendation from the beginning, I wouldn't recommend this necessarily for new pilots, just because of the higher risk of damaging parts. So this is so awesome. I am really liking this machine. So I went with the dual start on my Moster 185 because I want to be able to kill the motor and just paraglide and have that peace and quiet. And this thing, you can do that so easily. Just let off the throttle. Then when you need a little power, just add to it. And even when you add a little throttle, it's not this crazy amount of noise. It's pretty sweet. For just a cruiser, just something to hop on and, kind of do some sightseeing and buzz around a little bit, man, this thing is amazing. Very, very happy with it. So as you can see right now, we're, what are we at, 17 minutes in, and let's drop the throttle here. Let's see where our battery's looking at. Looks like we're going to be just over 50%, maybe 55. Not too bad. All right, not too bad. That kind of puts us around that 40-minute mark I was saying. So the main thing for me is to just get used to this thing and spend some time with it to figure out how I can maximize the battery. You know, if I want to do say I want to do a 45-minute flight, I'm going to have to adjust my flying characteristics for that 45-minute flight. If I'm going to go up and just say I'm going to crank it and bank it for 20 minutes, hey, no big deal. I can do whatever I want with this throttle. And from a reliability standpoint, you know, that was my big thing from the beginning when I compared the motor to the electric motor to the gas motor was, well, the reliability of electric motor. And then of course I have an issue with mine. But I do honestly believe that was a kind of a fluke, and at this point I do trust the motor, and I do feel like I shouldn't have any more issues from this point on. Keeping in mind, this is a new unit, so you're going to have, you know, some of those hurdles to get through as they figure out problems or things like that. Ah, this is nice. It's just a different kind of flying. I'm not used to this. And I've been wearing earplugs and my muffs to reduce my motor noise down to something similar to this. But this is even quieter than that, just having the muffs. So that's one thing with the gas motor I wasn't a huge fan of, is I really had to find a way to suppress that noise as best as possible in order to enjoy this experience. But also you want to be able to hear the motor too, because if there's going to be an issue, you want to be able to diagnose it. But yeah, I've been pretty happy with this flight so far. So it's saying we're at 34%, but of course I'm using that same throttle pressure. We're 80 amps, 6.5 kilowatts of power, that cruising speed. Underneath the Sport, right here, the 2.2 kilowatts, this is a 4 kilowatt battery. I believe it's 4 kilowatts. So that's showing how much we've consumed. So obviously it's saying 32%, but we're probably more like at 40, let's say 46% based off of that. Let's take a look and see how right I am. Okay, it's up to 40. 42. Okay, maybe I was a little bit high on that guess. But we can kind of use that as a gauge as well, since when we're on the throttle we can't really tell. So 43% is what it's saying. We've used 2.3 kilowatts, so seems pretty accurate. So of course with this type of motor you have to be aware of how far you are from your LZ, right? Because obviously if I'm too far from home, I'm not going to make it back when this battery is ready to be done. So I got to plan that a little bit. In the gas motor, it's the same way. You know, it's just I would trust to leave and go much farther from home with the gas motor than I would with this one. I'm guessing I might go a 2 to 3 mile radius from my home with this thing. It's just so cool because I'm just like hovering and it's fairly quiet. I'm just hovering in this real quiet line here. It's just interesting. It's definitely a much different experience and I really like it. It's a more positive experience. Now, how would I rate the power? When I go full throttle on my Moster, I've got a 3-blade, just like this has a 3-blade. Mine has a 130 centimeter prop. This has a 140 centimeter prop. So I'm going to go to full throttle, and I just want to have a little bit of a comparison between that and my sensation I feel with the Moster. That's pretty crazy. So I'm guessing it's about the same. The part that's difficult is there's just not a lot of sound. You know, with the Monster, when you're full throttle, I mean, that thing revs up, you're going, it's like 8,300 RPM, and it's loud. This thing is, you got the prop noise, but that's about it. So the sensations are different. If I was able to totally seal off the sound and not hear anything from either motor, my guess is they would be pretty similar. So, one thing I did notice with this thing, and this is much like anything electric. So when you put a high demand on the battery for a long period of time, you start to lose power from that. So it's not like this linear power where a gas motor, as long as you're feeding it with fuel, it's going to continue to make the same power. Batteries are different because they start depleting. Obviously you can see when I'm on a little bit of throttle here, it's showing 29%. When I let off the throttle, it's going to give me a more accurate reading. So it's something to think about when you're climbing out from your launch site. To be heavy on the throttle, you don't want to be in a situation where you have to be hard on the throttle for a long period of time, because you may in fact actually lose a little bit of power. So something to think about, and I'll play around with that a little bit more. I did notice it on the Florida flight when I was on the gas hard. I felt like all of a sudden the torque started to drop a little bit. It just didn't have the amount of thrust that I was hoping for. Now the other downside to this unit is that the throttle is a little bit bulky. I realize they want to have this display, this nice fancy display on here, which is nice. I definitely like that. I would much rather have this information maybe on the side here so that this area could stay nice and clean. Because the problem I have when I come in for a landing is that the throttle kind of gets in the way of the brake toggle. So I'm a little bit worried. So I can turn it off, of course, as long as I'm in a situation where I can spot land just fine. But when I have to land, like for example this evening, I'm going to have to land, just kind of swoop around my house and come in for a landing, because the winds are, I've got a headwind. So I don't mind doing that when I can have the throttle to regulate, just in case I need to throttle up a little, or maybe when I do the swoop between the house and the trees, it doesn't go quite well and I want to do a circle around. This is just a little, just not as, I'm not as comfortable with that in this situation. You can see how the brake and the throttle are just really close together. So part of it is my problem because I have to grab up higher in order to, I like to grab at the top of the toggles. You've probably seen in my other video where I grab up here when I'm coming in for my landing, so I have a little bit more flare authority. And I can't do that with this throttle. If I'm trying to grab up here, you can see that throttle is in the way, and it's gonna mess things up. So what I will probably have to do in this situation is just use the toggles when I come down, and I'm gonna have to push it way down in order to get that flare that I'm looking for. Yeah, this is really nice, like just tooling around like this. You know, I'm, what am I, 300-400 feet off the ground, and yeah, it's just so quiet. I feel like I'm a drone or a little RC helicopter just buzzing around here, because it's like no effort at all, no excessive noise. You can find that pressure point really nice where it's just enough to give you the give you the lift, and you can hold altitude real nice. Alright, I'm going to come in for my landing here. My battery, I still got some decent battery left. Actually, let's go to 30 minutes total for this flight. That way we can get a better idea. 30 minutes, what we have left for battery. We'll do that. One of the reasons I wanted to land a little bit early is because if I don't have a good landing opportunity, I definitely want to be able to circle around and have enough battery to land correctly. So oh, you know what? We got to take off our 360 camera too. I totally forgot about that. A little bit of a tricky. Actually, I don't really see much of any wind right now. Oh yeah, there is a little bit. Alright, let's see what we can do here. Oh yeah, we're coming in a little bit high. I wonder if we can crank this good. There we go. What the f-
That was not a pleasant landing. Wow. So we just got a very small headwind. I'd say a mile, maybe 2 miles per hour. And I did a nice swoop, but I lost so much energy in that second swoop. And then all of a sudden there was no wind. And I started coming down fast. And I have to take something back because I've said how many times, even if you had a mild crash on this thing, that it would break something. I didn't crash it, but I definitely felt the frame hitting the dirt. So I kind of came in and slid a little bit, but no injuries. And guess what? No damage. The thing's held up just fine. So obviously it wasn't a crazy, crazy accident, okay? But it was enough where I was even thinking if you were to drag this frame on the ground, you would break something. And my prop, this one was straight down, so I thought there's no way that prop survived. Everything's good though. So I am very happy with that. All right, let's take a look at our remote and see what we've got here. Okay, 30-minute flight. We got 30% of the battery left. We used 3.1 kilowatts out of the 4. That's really not that bad, right? Technically, we could still fly for another 10 or 15 minutes and still have a little bit of room for just in case, right? So that would put us closer to 45 minutes of flight time. And we did a couple hard accelerations. Obviously, when we took off, I swooped into my yard once and I took off. A couple low flies and then I came up. So if I took those out of the equation, I could definitely get, I'd say maybe 25 minutes more out of this. So that gives me a little bit of reassurance that we can get closer to that hour of possible flight time, right? I'm thinking more around that 40 minutes is probably something that we can more heavily rely on, 40 minutes of flight time. Definitely one of the perks I've got to mention is you get this guy back in your garage ready to go. No fueling it up, no checking over to make sure there's no leaks or checking your spark plug. All we do is we just plug it in. And this guy right here takes over. Now this guy's getting charged up and be ready for the next flight. So we're gonna finish packing things up. Thanks for following along today. Just remember, life's too short to be sitting there watching YouTube videos. So after this video, at least go do something cool. All right, guys, see you next time.